all these anti-democratic forces and use the simple playbook of using democracy to overthrow democracy. That's where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Senior correspondent at Vox and author of The Agenda, How a Republican Supreme Court is Reshaping America, Ian Millhiser is here, plus MSNBC contributor and columnist Charlie Sykes is back. Also joining us, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Justice Department, MSNBC legal analyst Mary McCord is here. New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton's here, who's got some great reporting on one of the folks we just mentioned that we'll get to in a second. I want to start with you, Ian, and the failure to take this all in, right? You hear he's got an affinity for autocrats. He really likes Orban. But the Grinnell reporting in The Guardian puts the architecture behind it, because Trump gets away with more than a normal politician because he's viewed as hapless and distracted and impulsive. But he's got folks working on this stuff all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges that those of us who would prefer not to have a second Trump administration have is that the first administration happened. It wasn't great, but it didn't end in authoritarian rule, permanent authoritarian rule in the United States. You know, not everyone who worked in the first Trump administration was a MAGA authoritarian. There are plenty of normie Republicans. There are plenty of generals that Trump appointed just so he thinks that that generals are macho. Second term will not look like that. First time around, Trump didn't think he was going to win. None of the Republican institutions, places like the Heritage Foundation, thought that he was going to win. So they didn't come up with lists of people that he could hire. Second time around, they are doing that work. First time around, Trump didn't know anyone in Washington, so he didn't know who to hire. Now he knows who his loyalists are. That's who he's going to point. That's who he's going to put on the bench. So the second term, I mean, you're going to be looking at a much more effective authoritarian machine than you had in the first term.
And Charlie, it goes beyond more effective people moving us toward authoritarianism to all the people that were so far right, they were distasteful to many people in the center and everyone on the center left. None of them are, how bad is it? It's so bad that Mike Pence, his former VP, isn't voting for him, and neither are any of the other people that served in his cabinet. It's hard. It's all relative, right? We're going to choose between a Republican and a Democrat. No, you're not. You're going to choose between a Republican who is so repulsive to his own former vice president that he will not vote for him for the first time in American political history.
Right, and you're hearing the same sorts of things from his former national security advisor, his former chiefs of staff, his former defense secretary. It is interesting looking back at 2017. The original Trump administration actually was staffed with a lot of normie Republicans, a lot of generals, a lot of people who were very, very conventional. But I think that Donald Trump and his inner circle have decided that that's one of the reasons that he did not succeed more, that he did not surround himself with the chemical loyalists, the people like Rick Grinnell, the people like Stephen Miller, the people like Jeffrey Clark. And I think that's the big difference, is that he doesn't want any of the conventional people. He doesn't even want the Mike Pences of the world. He wants people who will do his bidding. And I think that people need to think about that. I mean, Rick Grinnell is basically a jumped-up internet troll, TV personality. I mean, the fact that he was acting director of national intelligence is just one of the most, remarkable things. If he would have said this 10 years ago, that somebody like Rick Grinnell would be the ambassador to Germany, or that somebody like Stephen Miller would become the architect of domestic policy, including the policies on the border, people would have said these are exactly the kinds of people you don't want anywhere near the levers of power. And these are the kinds of people who he will bring back in a second Trump term.
Yeah, I mean, Mary, there was some incredible investigative work done by the Select Committee on the sort of endgame strain that Trump put on Gina Haspel and other lifelong national security experts. But to Charlie's point, you didn't have all of the agencies run by Kash Patels and Rick Grinnells. They were there. They weren't running the CIA. They weren't running the Pentagon. In a second Trump term, they would be. Can you just describe that sort of clash, not just of values and cultures, but of those who want to protect America's role in a democracy and as a democracy, and what they're promising to do on day one?
Well, that's what's so scary about this, right? I mean, as Ian laid out, the lists that they're coming up with now are the most extreme people. They are not the people that were in the first Trump administration. There were a lot of good people who thought that actually they could sort of, keep the government within the rails, right? And keep the institutions and protect the institutions and abide by norms and the rule of law. And when Mr. Trump realized, oh, you're not going to do my bidding, then he got rid of them. And I think we need to worry here. There might be people thinking, oh, well, how bad can it be? Because anybody he appoints to positions in his cabinet are going to have to be confirmed by the Senate. Well, putting aside for the moment that, both houses of Congress have quite a bit of their own turmoil and polarization. Mr. Trump, toward the second half of his administration, his first administration, said, to heck with getting my nominees confirmed. I'll just abuse the acting process, right? And so he used the Vacancies Reform Act and he even said to just appoint acting. People said, I like actings, basically, because, I can get rid of them if I don't like what they're doing. So, there won't be much of a check, I think, on those he appoints. I think we will see the most extreme people. And remember, at the very beginning of his administration, he had appointed Mike Flynn as his national security advisor. Mike Flynn didn't make it more than a few months because he lied to the FBI about the conversations he was having with those within Russia's government, about things that were going to be taking place after Mr. Trump became the president. Now, in this environment, would that result in Mr. Trump firing Mike Flynn? I don't think so. And the other thing we have to worry about, besides the leaders of the departments and agencies, including our national security agencies, is what he's promising to do to the civil service, right? Mm-hmm. Basically get rid of people who are not willing to be loyalists. And, that's got to be very concerning, too.
Eric, you've written about a piece of this that doesn't get much attention, but John Bolton actually wrote about it when he wrote his sort of tell-all that Bill Barr went to extraordinary lengths to try to keep from being published. And he wrote about concerns that he had that I believe he shared with Bill Barr about the potential that U.S. foreign policy as it pertained to Turkey had been corrupted by business interests. In a second Trump term, there would be no guardrails on the mixing of U.S. foreign policy and commercial business interests either. I think a lot of people worry. And I just want to bring back into the conversation a story that we shared when you broke it and put this into the mix. You wrote this, quote, "The plan by Jared Kushner and his business partners to redevelop a prized location in Serbia's capital, Belgrade, echoes interest from Donald Trump a decade ago in pursuing a deal for the site and a similar proposal pushed during his White House term. Rick Grenell, who Trump had appointed as a special envoy in the Balkans, pushed a related plan during the Trump administration that Serbia and the United States jointly worked to rebuild the defense ministry site. He argued in favor of using American investments to transform the Belgrade site while he was still serving in his official capacity as an American diplomat in 2020, according to transcripts and a recording of remarks he made during several government news conferences." It is harder to get at. This reporting is extraordinary because it does just that. But just talk a little bit about this story and this sort of commingling of official diplomatic roles and the way you present yourself around the world and business deals.
Yeah, it was quite striking because first you had Donald Trump when he was a private citizen before he was running for president, and when he expressed an interest in perhaps building a hotel in the center of Belgrade. That plan did not come to fruition. But then when Rick Grenell was working as a special envoy to Serbia and Kosovo, he then made a proposal to redevelop that same exact site. That, again, didn't happen. But now that they're all in the private sector, Rick Grenell is working with Jared Kushner, and yet again, the same site, they're building a hotel. So you had, private citizen Trump proposing a hotel in one place, Rick Grenell, while a diplomat proposing the United States help redevelop that site, and now Rick Grenell working with Jared Kushner. So there was a mixing of activities in the private sector to the government to the private sector again. I mean, and in Turkey, what happened there was you had the folks from the Justice Department pressuring the local prosecutor to drop a case against, a state-owned bank. This is when President Trump was in office, and the U.S. attorney in New York trying to resist that. But Erdogan was pressuring Trump to intervene to stop the Justice Department from pursuing this case against a state-owned bank in Turkey. And in that case, then, the Justice Department was pressuring the U.S. attorney. So you had a government official, urging Trump to intervene with the Justice Department. That happened in this first administration. So, it's to be seen how this plays out if in fact he goes back to the White House. But there is this commingling of duties that raises questions that we've been examining over time.
And Ian, we focus on the autocrat's tools that Trump talks about the most, right? Wielding his Justice Department to prosecute his political enemies. But what Eric's describing is in some ways perhaps the parts of being an autocrat or a dictator that create the most lure for Trump. Using the levers of government to enrich his company and himself. And there was some great reporting during his first term about how his hotels were the ones that the Secret Service had to use, or that refueling stops had to happen near the Scotland golf property. I mean, people got at it a little bit, but if you're talking about an absence of any guardrails and an elimination of all the norms in national security agencies and not even a ruse of any ethics, this may be the part of ruling as an autocrat that appeals to him the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing to understand about Donald Trump, he doesn't have an ideology. He's just greedy. And one thing that it means is that he's willing to bring in extreme ideologues that someone who had some sort of moral compass would say, no, that person goes too far if he thinks that the extreme ideologue will benefit him. It means that he will use the government to enrich himself. It means that he will create vehicles like his hotels that foreign diplomats can stay at, or Trump Social that they can invest in so that they can essentially give him bribes. And then the other thing that we have to worry about, this is one of my biggest concerns about if we have a second Trump term, is that Trump lost a lot of lawsuits in his first term. He's going to appoint many judges if he's president again. The judges who he's already appointed will be there. They weren't there at the beginning of his term. So the courts are already, Trumpier than they were the first time around. And on top of that, he knows which judges to appoint this time. Not every judge that he appointed the first time around. He basically delegated judicial selection to the Federalist Society, and the Federalist Society wasn't necessarily on board with everything that Trump wanted, all the personal enrichment that he wanted. But now he knows who the judges are that he can appoint. I mean, think of someone like Eileen Cannon, who's presiding over one of his criminal trials and has basically acted like one of his defense attorneys. Think of someone like Matthew Kaczmarek, this judge down in Texas, who tried to ban an abortion pill and who has, rubber stamped virtually any order that Republicans ask him to issue. He knows who to appoint so he can get away with anything. And that means when he pursues an agenda of personal greed and enrichment, no one's going to be there to stop him.
It's such a good point. Mary, I want to show you one more piece of sound on Rick Grinnell, because the Guardian is so on the nose here. And the next phase in sort of the Grinnell conversation will be, well, what's he going to do with him? Will he make him the head of the FBI, the head of the State Department, the head of the Pentagon? Because he will be viewed as someone, and this reporting that Eric's done of wearing these dual hats. But people should remember his role in trying to overturn a free and fair American election that was, in the words of his own fellow administration staffer, Chris Krebs, the most secure in American history. Here's what my colleague Jacob Sobroff caught him doing.
Hey, Rick Grinnell, we're live on MSNBC right now. Can you talk about the evidence? You are claiming thousands of illegitimate votes here in Nevada. What's the evidence?
You should go in and ask the question of the clerk.
No.
Which you haven't done.
You guys
yet,
just made the claim. No, in fact, you also said there's no election observers. There's Democratic and Republican election observers inside. Mr. Grinnell, former DNI Grinnell, acting DNI. Where's the evidence of the fraud? You haven't presented any evidence of fraud.
Where's the evidence?
They've presented no evidence of fraud, Craig. So we're live on MSNBC. You've said thousands of illegitimate ballots. Thousands of illegitimate ballots. Where are they?
Not a protector of America's democracy. And now, thanks to this great reporting, top of Trump's list, Mary, for perhaps a key national security role.
Yeah, and there's another role that he could have that doesn't even require going in front of the Senate, and that is National Security Advisor, right? And that's a role, the person in that role speaks daily to world leaders, has the ear of the president all day long, all night long, because national security is one of the president's major top priorities. Every morning, the president gets a daily brief, and he's sitting with his National Security Advisor. So to hear the kind of things that Rick Grenell look back on the things he's done in the past, see the engagements he's having now overseas, which do seem to be very transactional in nature, and to hear him to be so dismissive of protecting democratic processes, certainly needs to be raising alarm bells about what he would do if he were in a position like National Security Advisor or like one of the cabinet positions you were mentioning earlier. These are things that the people need to know before they go to the polls. I mean, all of us talk about this all the time, but it's just unclear to me how much of this is really sinking in and getting out there to the public.
Well, we'll still stay on it. In the public's defense, they have 7 months to start taking all this in. No one's going anywhere. When we come back, the disgraced ex-president's foreign policy in real life right now on the golf course, how he stands to cash in by hosting a golf tournament bankrolled by the Saudis. That story's next. And later in the broadcast, if you're someone who thinks the 2020 election was stolen or that January 6th didn't matter, you now have 2 choices for president this November. We'll tell you how Robert Kennedy Jr. is revealing his true colors on the issue we cover on this program almost daily, protecting democracy. Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, my name is Jim. I'm a very outdoors, active type person. With Balance of Nature, it sure has helped me feel really good every day. The fruits and vegetable ingredients, I think, is the whole foundation of what makes the product so good for me. I'm looking at the future, and I do not want to stop doing what I'm enjoying. With the product, I know I'll be able to continue it. I feel great. Can't complain about anything.
Get 35% off and $10 off any additional sets by using discount code LOVE.
Hey there, Brenda.
It's Carol.
Exactly. So which leg are we operating on?
You mean arm?
It's all connected.
Asking the right question can greatly impact your future.
Are you sure you're an orthopedist?
Actually, I'm a Sagittarius.
Especially when it comes to your finances.
Do you have a question? Are you a certified financial planner?
Yes, I'm a CFP professional.
CFP professionals are committed to acting in your best interest. That's why it's gotta be a CFP. Find your CFP professional at letsmakeaplan.org.
If you have chronic kidney disease, you can reduce the risk of kidney failure with Farxiga, because there are places you'd like to be. Farxiga can cause serious side effects, including ketoacidosis that may be fatal, dehydration, urinary tract or genital yeast infections, and low blood sugar. A rare life-threatening bacterial infection in the skin of the perineum could occur. Stop taking Farxiga and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this infection, an allergic reaction, or ketoacidosis.
Oh, my denture is uncomfortable.
Dracula, let's fight back against discomfort with new Polygrip Power Max Hold and Comfort. It has superior hold, plus keeps us comfy all day with its pressure-absorbing layer.
Time for a bite.
If your mouth could talk, it would ask for
Polygrip.
For fast sore throat relief, try Vicks VapoCool Drops with 2 times more menthol per drop and powerful Vicks Vapors to vaporize sore throat pain. Vicks VapoCool Drops, vaporize sore throat pain.
Today is the day to dream big and take chances, to go on the adventure you've always dreamed of, and know that wherever you are, wherever the open road takes you, you can rely on Spectrum Mobile. With nationwide 5G and reliable service to keep you connected on your epic journey. From the desert to the mountains to all the unexpected points in between. Get the service you need coast to coast to live life your way with the connection you can count on. Ask how you can get a Visa Rewards card up to $500. Get Spectrum Mobile for $15 a month each when you get 2 unlimited lines. Call, click, or visit a Spectrum store today.
Point. when yesterday's words become today's consequences.
All of a sudden, I'm getting attacked by my community.
Canceled, the story of cancel culture. Sunday at 9 on MSNBC.
Katie Tur reports, weekdays at 3 on MSNBC.
Alarm bells are ringing loudly among the ethics-interested segment of the population about the financial ties and assistance Donald Trump may be getting from the Saudis, whose live golf tournament he's hosting this weekend. This tournament brings new questions about political favors and foreign policy to candidate Trump's ties to the Saudi government, whose sovereign wealth fund is backing the tournament at Trump's resort, and at the same time bankrolling an investment firm set up by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. From the New York Times again, quote, Trump spoke recently with Saudi Arabia's leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Two people briefed on the discussion said the Biden administration has been working with Saudi Arabia on a Middle East peace plan. It is not clear what Trump and the Saudi leader discussed. The reporting adds this, quote, the indirect revenues for the Trump family could be considerable. That is on display this week at Doral, where hotel occupancy is way up. The Trump org and Live Golf both declined to say what share of these revenues the Trump family gets or what other payments it receives. A Live spokesman said only that the arrangement with the Trump family was on comparable terms with any other U.S. venue. We're back with New York Times reporter Eric Lipton, who's bylined on that reporting. Ian, Mary, and Charlie are with us as well. Eric, what can you tell us about what's happening, and what is your reporting details some of the concerns sort of on the ethics, foreign policy, money front?
I think that what's happening is that we're entering a period again where so many of the business endeavors that Donald Trump has engaged in, before he was in office and since he left office, everything now comes with a potential for it creating at least an appearance of a conflict of interest. And for a while, the attention of the public and of others, government officials, was on his activities in the aftermath of the election, and not as much about what he was doing as a businessman, because he was a private citizen. But now that he is the presumptive Republican nominee and perhaps is going back to the White House, he's so engaged in the private sector, so many of these business interests will create a potential conflict of interest or a real conflict of interest. So in the case of Live Golf, they had 3 tournaments at his golf courses in 2023. They're having a tournament there this weekend. We're talking about, potentially $1 million a piece that's going to the Trump org for hosting these events to cover their costs. And also, there are occupancy at the hotel, restaurants, other revenue sharing that's going on. And so effectively you have the sovereign wealth fund backed Live Golf that's paying money to the family of the presumptive nominee for the Republican presidential nomination. Even on its face, that it seems problematic, when this is the same person who could potentially very soon again be in charge of foreign policy as it relates to the Middle East. So, I think we've kind of re-entered this period of examining these conflicts of interest, and it's only just beginning.
Eric, I'm thinking back to, and you're right, he's out of office, but he is the presumptive nominee, makes clear in his own words his deep interest in returning to office. I'm thinking, too, though, of his statements in the New York civil fraud trial, where he said that his valuations of Mar-a-Lago were because the Saudis would basically pay anything for it. I mean, if we just take Trump by his own word, he's made clear that the Saudis would pay basically whatever he wanted for Mar-a-Lago. Is there any deeper understanding of the financial, sort of the money that flows between the sovereign wealth fund associated with MBS and the Trump orbit?
It's just sort of odd to me as a reporter that's written a number of these stories. I mean, you have the Saudi real estate company that's backed a project that he's now participating in Oman to build Trump villas and a golf course in Oman. You have the Live Golf and the Sovereign Wealth Fund that's had 4 tournaments in the last year approximately at his venues in the United States. And then you have the same Sovereign Wealth Fund that's backed both his former Secretary Treasurer Mnuchin and his son-in-law. So there's just a lot. Now, again, this is one of the richest countries in the world with an oil-backed sovereign wealth fund that has, hundreds of billions of dollars and is investing all over the world. But there's a frequency of this relationship that again makes us wonder as reporters and as the public as to what's really behind this. Why are they so interested in backing the Trump family and people associated with Trump? And it's something that we will continue to examine.
Charlie, there's something it's actually sad. I was going to say comical, but it's sad. I mean, Trump's political reflex is to goose white grievance. That's his one trick. While he is lining his pockets, literally and figuratively, with mountains of Saudi cash.
Well, and it's also alarming because he is talking with MBS. What is he talking about? What is he promising? What is he saying that he will do for the Saudis? And obviously, the ties go very, very deep. And I guess let me put this more bluntly. I think the American people have a right to know whether or not the murderer of Jamal Khashoggi is trying to buy off the future president of the United States. I mean, that seems like it would be beyond the pale of any normal scandal. You have somebody who is desperate for cash, desperate for money. As Eric Story makes very, very clear, his hotel business is in decline. He is increasingly reliant on golf, and his golf courses are reliant on the Saudi money. They have been engaged in this conflict of interest, but what part of the national interest might he be surrendering? What promises is he making? Is he in fact doing anything to undermine this country's peace initiatives in the Middle East? We are in completely unprecedented, once again, territory. But the implications are really alarming when you think about it, because what does MBS expect from a President Donald Trump in return for all of this investment and this largesse?
It is the $64 million question that hangs over everything that happens over the next 7 months. This conversation to be continued with all of your help. Ian, Mary, and Eric, thank you so much for starting us off and spending the first half of the hour with us. Charlie sticks around when we come back. For anyone curious